Welcome to the Freedom Factor. I'm your host, Oliver Bardwell. Today, our special guest for this week at the Capitol is Representative Eddie Andrews. Representative Andrews, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Oliver. I look forward to talking with your audience. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. It's been kind of a fun thing to do, and it's nice to get the inside scoop from representatives as to what's going on at the Capitol. So, and with that, I'll just ask you, what's going on at the Capitol this week?
Well, we have a lot of activity that's going on. Last Friday was the last day to submit bills, not to file the bills, but to actually get them started for this session. And there was a plethora of bills being filed that day. One colleague filed 29 bills that day, and I'm sorry, not filed, but submitted 29 bills that day. I think I submitted another 10 or so. They don't have numbers yet, but they're still in drafting. And the big one this past week was passed. The House and the Senate both passed the what they call tort reform. And I was one of the ones who did not vote for that, but that was obviously a big one for the state of Iowa. That changes a lot of things. Pipeline bills were filed. Representative Steve Holt filed one, submitted. There is a difference between those two words, sorry. Submitted one on yesterday, I believe, and a lot of bills that are underway for education. You know, a big thing that happened this week. Let me start with that one. You know, we've been talking about education in schools and how to get our schools back to number one. What do we need to do? Obviously the governor's Students First Act, we passed that. And while we heard from a lot of people, we've heard from administrators, we've heard from parents, one of the people or groups of people that we have not heard a lot from, because a lot of teachers want to remain neutral, right, is teachers. And so there was a group of teachers who came to the Capitol on Monday. Wow. Absolutely amazing listening to these teachers. And what was surprising for those of you guys who have not actually been talking to teachers is that how thankful they were for the legislation that has been passed and things that are on the agenda coming up. It was really fascinating, and we listened to them roughly for 2.5 hours. It was nonstop, just hearing their concerns, hearing their thoughts. They want to be teachers. I mean, they got into this area to help our kids, to work with them and not be therapists and mom and dad replacements. They want to get back to the basics, just like we want them to get back to the basics. They were just crying out for that and says, yes, thank you so much for what you've done. Keep us informed. We're promoting the things that are coming up. They were largely in favor of, and it was just an almost surreal experience listening to them. And I've heard a lot of these stories, but a lot of my colleagues had not. And one particular colleague sent a note that said it was the most life-changing meeting he's ever been in. Think about that.
Oh, wow. I think that surprises me because I think some teachers have been afraid to speak out.
Well, yeah. And I even put a little post on my website not on my website, but one on my Facebook pages. And um, there was the standard people who just question that. Like, I can't believe they said that. I call, foul on that one. And this is just absolutely amazing. We had people from all over the state, not just central Iowa, but from other parts of the state who participated. It was just,
What kind of stories were you hearing? Is there any one that jumps out at you?
well, before I get into the stories, let me just always say the idea is to always get back to our kids. How do we prepare our kids for the future? How do we best prepare them for the future? And that's what they wanted. Um, a lot of times the media narrative is, uh, if you want to have an honest and open conversation about making changes, sometimes we can't really have that discussion because people jump in and say, well, if you don't agree with 100% of my side, then you are against teachers, then you want to destroy public schools. That is not the goal. We want to strengthen our public schools. We want our public schools to be the best. Matter of fact, my initiative is getting Iowa schools back to #1. And but some of the stories, I'll just start with the ones that are public, because sometimes if I tell a personal story, um, you get parents who want to be anonymous, and they tell you a story and you repeat it anonymously, and then you get 75 people who want to know. I need to know who this person. Like, no, that's why they want to be anonymous. So I'll just start with just some of the concerns, um, that are out there. One, there's a policy in many school districts of no homework. There's an active no homework policy, and it's almost strictly enforced, almost to the level of there shall be no homework, right? Um, instead of a homework optional. There's the elimination of finals. There's the infinite number of retakes of tests, which the lax attitude, they were, again, these are their stories. The lax attitude means that kids, unless you are self-disciplined, or if you come from a family that makes sure you do those things, it's very easy for them to get lost and say, oh, well, I'm not going to study. I'll just repeat it, take this test 5 days in a row at the end of the semester. Um, and there's also, again, in their words, cases of discipline where there's no detention anymore. So there's often not consequences. And some of the people were concerned, some of the teachers were concerned about having more administrators than teachers. Think about that fact. Again, whether or not one believes that is critical, I think it is a legitimate starting point for people to say, hey, what are we doing here? Let's see if this is working. And if it's not working, let's get back to basics where we were when Iowa did rank at the top, when the focus was reading, writing, and arithmetic. There's also a policy in many school districts where grammar is not being taught, spelling is not being taught, no math after 10th grade. Well, the math, I think it's no math required after 10th grade, but in some cases, no math after 10th grade. Again, these are stories that we heard from these teachers, and ultimately, they don't want to have disruptive kids, uh, disrupting the entire class. They were concerned about policies. Uh, Specifically, they mentioned SEL and the Leader in Me and some of these other types of what they felt like were getting in the way of class time. So by the time you start talking about all of these programs and tools, you really don't have time for the lesson. It almost sounds like boy, it just almost sounds surreal, some of the stories he said.
I tell you, Eddie, it's really heartening to hear you say that because at a local level, those are the things parents have been pushing for is a back to basics kind of idea, and they've had so much pushback from administrators and school boards. And to hear
Right,
teachers come forward and say that and say the same things we've been saying all year long, that really is kind of validating.
right. One of the stories that was it's just mind blowing. So many stories. There's the one where you are not allowed to give criticism. You have to give, was it whatever the ratio was, but I believe they said, was it 10-1? But again, whatever the ratio is, it was like 10 compliments before you could say something negative. In other words, if you've got a disruptive person, you have to say, um, I like your shoes. I like the fact that you are really trying hard. I like the fact that this, and then you could actually get to the criticism. I'm like, are you joking me? Joking with me? Um, uh, there's one particular example. I don't want to get too specific because then I might review the reveal the school, which might reveal some of the students or the teachers. But there was one particular student who's had the police called on him a couple times. Still is there. When he disrupts the class has to leave and understand why he might be disruptive instead of him understanding that he's disruptive, right? The onus is the teachers kept reminding us that they were concerned that this is not preparing our kids for the future. I mean, imagine an architect who gets to build a building 5 times. No, there's only one answer. You don't get to take the test 75 times. And go ahead.
And those the architects already drive our framers crazy, so I can't imagine an architect that can redo it 5 times. Dangerous and costly.
Right. And so ultimately, again, it's we want our kids well prepared for the future. And our teachers expressed a lot of concern that we need to have honest and open conversations without targeting and being doxxed and being put all over social media as some um, one of those teachers. They just want to teach. They love students, they love teaching, they love helping. And they're, like I said, they were grateful for the steps that we've taken because it's brought attention to some of the things that we need to focus on.
Yeah, and I see that in the legislation. I mean, with removing Castle, uh, rethinking SEL, opt-in surveys, changing this whole gender identity conversation. So it's not being had with our kids in the school system. I think you guys are really moving in the right direction in education.
Well, thank you. And the conversations are not over. We're still listening, and we invite people on all sides. You can't even say both sides, but on all sides of these issues. Personally, email me, Eddie at eddie4iowa.com, number 4, by the way, not FOR, and or 515-800 Iowa. That's my phone. Or other ways, social media. You can reach us on. And I personally want to hear all these stories and your ideas. Um, we can't take everything personally. Sometimes I agree, sometimes I don't, but I certainly try to listen to everyone and move forward, move our state forward, move our kids forward.
For sure. And we had HF8 was in committee. I see that the report was it's recommending amendment and then passage on the 15th, which was
Is
yesterday.
that the is that the one that is
A bill for an act prohibiting instruction related
K
to gender
12, K
identity.
6?
I think it was K through 3, but I don't know what the recommended
Hmm.
amendment was. I imagine it
Okay.
was recommended to be amended to K through 8, which was
My understanding was that it was K through 6,
Oh,
but
really?
there was discussion K through 8, and I we'll know it by the time this airs. We will know if it was K6 or K through 8. But the point is, there are certain things that are age appropriate, and we want to make sure that parents are involved in those if they have those discussions, and not being taught like our teachers just told us. They want to be teachers, not parents.
Right, exactly. And there's been this commingling of the two, and parents' rights have seemed to be infringed upon a little bit, and teachers have been given a lot more responsibility than they signed up for, I believe. So
Absolutely.
what else what other big things happened this past week at the Capitol?
So, like I said, I have a plethora of bills that are still in drafting. One of the bills that did come out of drafting was caught a lot of attention by a few people, by a lot of people. That was I don't know the bill number, but it's a bill that restricts out of state funding for campaigns. And I think we should all play by the same rules, but at the same time, we want to make sure that Iowans elect Iowans and not New Yorkers elect Iowans or Californians elect Iowans. And so the idea is you can't eliminate it, but you can certainly reduce it. I believe this will be merged into what will be probably one big election bill over the next week or two. We'll see. But I love that. And a lot of people have expressed a lot of appreciation, both on Democrats, Republicans, and independents.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So we'll see that having a bill number soon.
Oh, no, it does have a bill number.
Okay. Oh, okay.
It does have a bill number.
I'll
I
have
just
to,
don't know what the bill number
okay,
is.
that's okay. Yeah, let me know and I'll put it on our watch list so we can
Okay.
keep an eye on it. And anything else coming up this next week that we should be on the lookout for? I'm sure there is. I mean, it just blows me away how many bills go through during a session.
Well, like I said, I've got a number that are that will surprise you. Um, I'll just keep those to ourselves until they're actually out of drafting. But Steve Holt, Representative Steve Holt, did file the House version of a carbon pipeline bill. We want to make sure that eminent domain is used for public projects and not necessarily private projects. We want to make sure that, I mean, it gets back, in my view, and others don't share this view, but my view, this is fundamental to the United States of America, the whole concept of private property ownership, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. I think you're certainly familiar with the phrase pursuit of happiness, actually referring to property. And I love it. And to me, it's very troubling that private projects can use public eminent domain. Um, that's just
That's wrong. That's just fundamentally wrong. So I'm so happy that you guys are
yeah,
working on that.
yeah. And as of right now, we'll see. I personally believe in the 100% philosophy. I'm not sure if we have enough votes to get that through, but there is a Steve Holt's bill, excuse me, Representative Holt's bill is it's at the 90% level. So you can't move forward unless 90% of people in that path have agreed to. And there's also a stipulation that if it's a multi-state pipeline, that you have to have approval in all of the other remaining states before you can actually begin in Iowa. And just, it's a way to slow this down while we're working on protecting private property of the citizens of Iowa. And this whole thing of having 150 people, we have to do what we can actually get through. Like I said, I'd prefer 100% required, but again, we don't have the votes for that. So
Well, we appreciate you working on that for us. That's an important right. I mean, not to have your property taken for a private pipeline. I mean, that's been a big deal, and it's really kind of a bipartisan push, is
Right. Yes. Yes. I look at this as a traditional conservative Republican kind of almost libertarian um, view, but there are several Democrats who ran on this issue. So it's bipartisan. Um, we've had some lively debates. We'll keep those contents of those private, but it's there's a lot going on.
that's awesome. Yeah, it's good to see that that there is some coming together between, you know, the parties to protect our rights in that area.
Yes. Yeah, and I think most people who are just running their lives, living their lives, going to work, providing for their kids, going to football games, wrestling tournaments, um, you know, they really want us to get stuff done down here. They don't want to have to pay attention all the time. Uh, and so anything that we can work together on and protect their private property, they're just happy. So
Right, right.
that's the feedback that I've gotten.
For sure. For sure. Um, before you came on, I was watching your talk at the Moms for Liberty
Oh, that was fun.
town hall, man. You were on fire. You were on fire, and you said, since the dawn of mankind, parents have been in charge of the education and moral training of their children, and that's not going to change here in Iowa. And that was received by lots of applause and cheers and amens, and so we appreciate that. That
Thank
was
you.
an amazing speech. Now,
Thank you so much for saying
yeah, I want to ask you. You said you were the seventh child, so how many siblings do
that. So, wow, we have just a whole lot.
you have?
Um, the good thing about a big family is that you can't take things personally. I jokingly say that, uh, my big brothers and sisters probably took advantage of me because obviously I was a little kid, and they probably owe me thousands, if not millions of dollars. Hey, when I get older, I'm going to give you this if you do this. But when you have fights, though, when you argue, you just you can't stay mad. You get up and you work together the next day. You play together the next day, and I think um, that's worked to my advantage. Um, I'm very comfortable with working with people who I disagree with strongly on certain issues. I mean, you kind of know who I'm married to, right? We don't see eye to eye on a number of issues, but you know, oh well,
At
you
the
just
end of
work
the
together
day.
on the things that you can work on and agree to disagree on certain issues. And yeah, but
Yeah, I'm the youngest of 8, so I
oh,
know
really?
exactly what you're talking about. The other day, I was on the phone with one of my older sisters, and we had a heated debate about the shot and masks and everything else under the sun, but at the end of the conversation, it was, "Hey, I love you, brother. I love you."
Sure, sure,
And it was not even a big deal. It was just we had a
right,
debate, and I think people should be able to do that.
right. Matter of fact, my sister as well, uh, actually, I believe has a program that actually promotes getting the shot. And I like, you know what? I look at the same data and arrive at a drastically different conclusion. I respect your opinion, but I can only see what I see, and the research that I looked at when I started looking at the research way back in November of 2020, like the preliminary information, I I predicted everything that was going to happen, and then some, because it's literally right there in the data. We looked at myocarditis, we looked at some of the other things, and I literally thought they were well, I was perplexed because I was wondering, why are they saying this publicly when the data clearly says this? And so there you go. I can respect her opinion and other people's opinions, and I just look at the same data and I'm like, that's not what I conclude.
Exactly. And we need to be able to have those conversations, though. I think that there's been so much polarity, whether it's education, whether it's COVID, whether it's there's just been a bigger division than there ever has been.
Right.
It's like you can't
Right.
disagree.
You know what? A good example is, and I don't want to call anybody out, but there was, especially without their permission, but there was a person on the school choice, the Students First Act, absolutely polar opposites on this. And then one of the next big bills, we were on the same side. Um, and you have to, you almost, it's almost like a sports team, right? When you if you get dunked on, uh, oh well, you still are in the game. You just have to play the next play, forget what just happened, and play the next play, and continue to keep the state of Iowa in your focus, and try to work on the next bill that you can work on together, and not take all the losses and wins personally, but always keep the people of Iowa in mind.
And that's important. And we thank you for that. And
Yeah.
I want to thank you for joining us for this short episode. That's what these are, is just kind of a short update for our viewers and listeners. And if you're listening, I hope you've enjoyed this and found it helpful. And please share it, like it, subscribe. Eddie, where can everybody find you? I know you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but let's end the episode with that.
Wow. Well, you can look us up all over social media. On Facebook, it's just Eddie for Iowa, EDDIE number 4 Iowa. And on Instagram, it's Eddie Andrews Rocks, and Twitter, it's Eddie Andrews, and the website is Eddie for Iowa or eddieandrews.com, either one.
All right. Well,
And yeah.
okay. Well, and I'll put those in the description. So just click the links, and thanks for always fighting for us, Eddie. Anytime I leave
Thanks.
the house, I think I see you. So are you ever home? I mean, it's
I love helping people, and that's the good thing about this job, is you get to help a lot of people. I'm not a fan of the politics of politics, but the helping part of politics, I love helping people. So
well, it shows. It shows in everything you do. So thank you so much for joining us. Everybody, thank you for listening. And remember, until next time, our liberties we prize and our rights we will maintain.
yes, sir.